Hey y'all, Owen here, and today we're going to be talking about gamers, again. Though this time we're also talking about something a little bit different from last episode. Well, the title of this video mentions capitalism because that's what I think is the most general way to describe what we're going to be talking about. I am not actually going to be talking, at least broadly, about the system we call capitalism. I don't think that we shouldn't use the term capitalism generally, but it is kind of a loaded term that carries a lot of baggage with it that will slow us down if we try to deal with it here, so I'm choosing not to. Instead, we will only talk about specific issues gamers have, specific solutions they reject, underlying connections that they ignore, and how this denialism perpetuates these issues. Now, I'm not saying that these issues aren't necessarily products of capitalism. It's my personal opinion that they are. But I feel like simply saying that these issues are caused by capitalism will not only turn people off of what we're discussing, but also skim over an actually nuanced analysis of the issues themselves. So, all I'm going to be doing today is talking about some problems, some solutions, and some ideas, and I'll let you draw your own conclusions. Since the dawn of time, better known as about 2018, there has been an epic battle raging between Valve's platform Steam, bravely defended by proud gamers, and the Epic Games Store. If you're not familiar with this conflict, it fundamentally hinges upon a hatred held by many gamers towards Epic Games, the developers of Fortnite, and their Epic Games Store, a competitor to Valve, developers of Portal, Team Fortress 2, and Half-Life, and their online games retailer, Steam. Since the Epic Games Store's launch on December 6th of 2018, Epic has faced criticism for its business practices, specifically their practice of signing exclusivity deals with developers to ensure that their games will only release on the Epic Games Store platform. Fueled in part by a genuine dislike of the business practices, and in part by a dislike of the company for their relation to Fortnite, which is perceived by quote-unquote popular internet culture as uncool and for children, a popular movement against Epic has emerged. Back to the specific issues though, it's interesting that the practice of platform exclusivity is not at all uncommon within the games industry, and while it is primarily present on consoles, it is by no means unheard of on PC, with the Microsoft Store employing similar tactics. Also worth noting is that the Epic Games Store takes only 12% of revenue from game sales, while Steam continues to take nearly 30%. You might be wondering why I'm mentioning these two things, and well, my question is this. Why do we care more about corporations using their resources to increase the viability of their platform than we do about how much developers are paid? I'm not going to make a moral judgment about this, or even try to explain it. I think both of these are important issues. I'm definitely anxious about corporations being able to do whatever they want with their resources, but I'm also concerned about making sure workers are properly compensated as much as possible for their work. My problem here is that we seem to care about corporations doing whatever they want when they're making a new free platform that slightly inconveniences us to download, and not so much when a corporation leverages its state of near monopoly to take significant portions of income from those creating what they are distributing. Now, there could be any number of reasons that the standards various companies in various areas are held to are wildly different, but I'm not really interested in that. I'm going to take these opinions in good faith and assume that gamers really do think that these practices are bad, even if they don't apply that belief evenly everywhere. What I'm interested in is how this failure to hold all parties accountable in the same way keeps the practices from actually being addressed. If, when we have a problem with the corporation, we don't stop at yelling about it into the void and try to get something done about it, we can't go into that condemning certain overreaches of power and not others. If we want to only address what affects us and not others, the systems we hate will never really be done away with. As I said, I'm not going to say that the gamers who dislike the Epic Games Store hate capitalism, but what I'm saying is that they see structural problems with the way that business is done and want to see it changed. And, well, so do I. This next section is, in large part, about Reddit. For those who are unaware, Reddit is a social media platform centered around topic-specific subcommunities within the larger platform, known as subreddits. However, while the platform is focused on these somewhat insulated communities which feature a broad range of sentiments and attitudes towards any issue under the sun, there does exist a wider quote-unquote Reddit popular culture, which is what we're going to be talking about here when I'm referencing Reddit culture. As we covered in part 1, inconsistent accountability for different corporations in different areas leads to no real accountability for any of them. Here, though, we're going to be talking about a somewhat different kind of selective accountability, best demonstrated by Reddit's relationship to Blizzard Entertainment, the developers of Diablo, Warcraft, StarCraft, and Overwatch franchises, among others. Over the past several years, Blizzard has been the target of a series of campaigns against them, led in large part by the R-Gaming subreddit and much of Reddit as a whole. Motivated in large part by Blizzard's perceived involvement with and submission to the Chinese government, most notably with Blizzard's temporary banning of Hearthstone player Blitzchung over pro-Hong Kong comments on stream. Because this specific instance is the most well-known, we'll focus on it for now. Now, it's clear that, on Blizzard's part, this decision was not made because of some ideological discrepancy between Blitzchung and Blizzard. In fact, Blizzard being an American company and considering the general sentiments of most Americans towards the CCP, Blizzard upper administration actually probably agrees with him. This was a decision made, fairly transparently, to prevent the risking of their ability to operate in Chinese markets. For the same reason America's National Basketball Association tries to appease them, reliance on profits from China, coupled with China's strict policy on who is and is not allowed to engage in economic activity, Blizzard made the decision to prioritize profit over morals. So, what did Reddit do to bravely stand up to this? They, made memes? And half-heartedly boycotted games that hadn't come out yet for a month before they forgot about it again. But this wasn't the first time Blizzard would engage in practices that would put profit before morals and fans, nor would it be the last, and by extension it wasn't the first time or the last time that they had faced this kind of a reaction. So why hasn't it stopped them? Well, because, as I'm imagining most of you have picked up, because the response failed to address the underlying reasoning, to correctly identify the problem with what was occurring, and to respond in a meaningful way. Let's tackle each of those in order. First, they failed to address the underlying reasoning. A big mistake in dealing with Blizzard was the attitude that the decision they made were moral failings, rather than decisions made perfectly consistent with how business is done. By attributing it to morals, the problem itself is made unique to Blizzard, or at least a problem which can be avoided by certain more moral corporations. Second, they failed to correctly identify the problem. Wait, you might be thinking, this is the one thing they did right? And yeah, they did. Kinda. That is to say, they correctly identified the fact that Blizzard submitted to China. But they failed to address the fact that this was motivated by underlying systems that affect all corporations. And now, some of you are probably thinking, of course, capitalism. And personally, yeah, I agree, but I don't think we even need to go that far to present a better response. A condemnation of capitalism or corporatism isn't even necessary, to start at least. All that needs to be acknowledged is that this is a broad set of factors that affects all companies with profit incentives. Finally, third, they failed to respond in a meaningful way. Of the three, this is the easiest to explain and the most obvious. Boycotts were weak and temporary without any real resulting change, and other actions did little to hurt Blizzard outside of a relatively temporary hit to image. People recognized that what was going on was bad, but because they failed to recognize the systemic nature of the issue, nothing could really be done. This can be more widely applied to our responses to many corporations. Someone messes up, we half-heartedly respond with temporary outrage which fails to acknowledge the underlying factors, the corporation apologizes, and we forget about it. The cycle repeats. So, we talked a bit in the previous two sections about how different companies, or even the same company at different points in time or related to different issues, are held to wildly different standards when it comes to certain business practices. But we haven't really gone super in depth yet about what's wrong with that. As I said earlier, I'm not going to be talking about why this is the case. All I care about here is what the problem with it is. And the problem is, to put it simply, companies aren't your friends. Now, that's a pretty pedestrian idea, I get it. I kind of doubt that there are very many people in the world who genuinely think that companies personally care about them. However, it is the case that, through enjoyment of a product, identification with a brand, or any number of other factors, people fall into weird relationships with these companies where they believe that they are in some way virtuous. Now, first of all, I want to make clear that I'm not shitting on anyone for liking games, or liking a certain company's games, or even liking a certain company. I think it's pretty clear that I myself even am quite partial to the games and specific developers. What I'm taking issue with is the fact that a large part of the gaming community takes their enjoyment of a company's products and turns it into a genuine belief that the company itself is in some way virtuous, admirable, or worthy of being defended. And that's a dangerous place to put yourself in. Now, I'm not saying that companies can't do good things, or even that they're all equal in badness. I think it's undeniable that some are way worse than others. But you have to recognize that it is the undeniable case that all companies have to react to market forces or go under. Major successful companies who are quote-unquote nice to you are doing so, in large part at least, because they consider it to be the best way to be lucrative. Now, do no corporations have virtuous people in them who motivate the corporation to do good? Of course not, that does happen. But corporations aren't static. Again, they react to what they need to react to in order to keep turning a profit. And if that means they have to stop being nice, then that's what it means. Many publishers and developers who were once considered to be on the cutting edge in delivering to the consumer exactly what was wanted are now, without any major changes in leadership, considered exploitative. Take Bethesda, once respected, now often maligned for their subpar cash grab products. No major changes occurred in the upper echelons of Bethesda's leadership. This kind of behavior was simply seen to be more profitable. So, am I saying that we shouldn't applaud and reward devs and publishers for good practices? Of course not. What I'm saying is that we shouldn't act as if that behavior is something inherent to them, which comes exclusively from virtue. Additionally, it's worth noting that often even what are considered to be good companies have scores of issues within them, such as toxic work environments, an issue still prevalent in games development, unethical practices within their games, and exploitation of employees in order to get a product out on time. Not only should some of these issues that aren't often addressed be addressed, such as development crunch, it's also the case that issues that we take with one dev and not another should be recognized equally. We all love to attack the big bad of the gaming scene, Electronic Arts, for their loot boxes in Star Wars Battlefront 2, but it seems we often forget that good publisher Valve popularized them with their good game Team Fortress 2. It's not just that we're being hypocritical to criticize only one and not the other. By failing to do so, we're actively preventing actual change from happening. If companies see that certain practices that are frowned upon are good so long as you're one of the good ones, well, they'll try to look like one of the good ones to do it. Whether they succeed or not doesn't really matter. What matters is that the door is left open. If we're going to take a stand against, say, loot boxes, then we have to do so uniformly. If we criticize Battlefront 2, we criticize Overwatch, we criticize TF2. And if it turns out that maybe being against such mechanics uniformly isn't the best policy, then we can take a more nuanced approach to our criticism. Think about what exactly sets, say, Battlefront 2 apart. How, in particular, is it more exploitative than anything else? I don't think that what I'm saying means we need to immediately drop everything and lead a crusade against every company for mild grievances we have. We just need to be more cautious and thoughtful when we dole out criticism. Have loyalty to ideals and behavior, not to the company, dev, or publisher who acts that way or follows their ideals. If they fall in line with how you think they ought to be acting, that's great, but know that that isn't a static position, and hold them accountable when they stray from it. Now, I've been going on long enough about what I think is the problem with how the gaming community deals with corporations and unsavory business practices, but I don't want to be a channel who just presents problems without talking about what I think we could do to go about fixing them. To me, basically, the point of thinking critically and talking about issues in just about anything is to make people aware of them in order to motivate their interest in seeing them solved. So if you're just presenting issues without discussing solutions, you're really only doing half of your job. But regardless, how do I think we should go about solving this apparent crisis of accountability within the gaming community? Well, I honestly think it might not be that difficult, and videos like this are one way of going about it. When I look at the gaming community today, what I see is a large group of people who are seeing many of the same issues with corporatism and rampant exploitation of the consumer and the working class that I, and I'm sure many of you, do. However, this energy isn't very evenly distributed, and it's not really got any ideological foundation or backing, for the moment at least. But I actually see this as a positive situation because that energy is already there, and that kind of energy can be redirected far more easily than it can be created. We've been making progress over the past years, but with a concerted effort I think that we could really make a big difference here. However, while this means that the gaming community is open to our influence, it goes both ways. The right, and far right especially, also often, at least initially, play off of surface level critiques of capitalism, which they either attribute to an ideology or group of people and use to sell a far right alternative to it. Now, of course, there are many factors involved in the gaming community's increasingly tight bond with the far right, and we talked in this video about a very specific set of gaming subcultures. I don't think it's a stretch to attribute it, at least in part, to this kind of empty ideology of opposition, waiting to be propped up by something. So, how do we fix this? We reach out to gamers, we put ideas in front of them, let them interact with them on their own. That's honestly in part why I've stylized this channel as a gaming one, even though the focus is political commentary. I think it's really important to get that kind of crowd interested in politics in a healthy way. Even just after my first video, I had a friend on a gaming forum tell me that it got them to think about politics in relation to games in a way that they hadn't before. And honestly, that was just the coolest thing, and I think that's really what I'm going for here. So, really, my solution is just what I'm doing now. Hey y'all, thanks for watching. I'd love to hear your thoughts or even rebuttals down in the comments. Also, if you have topics you'd like me to cover, be sure to drop them down there as well. I'll be sure to take a look. I have a lot of episodes already planned, but if something really catches my eye, I might make room for it. Well, that's all for me today. Stay safe out there, and I'll see you next time.